just another night for Supernatural Girlz. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only Supernatural Girlz.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girlz Radio. I am your host, Patricia Baker, and I'm here with my co-host, the very famous Patricia Kirkman, PK, all the way from Tucson. How you doing, PK?
Absolutely fabulous today. We have sunshine, and it feels warm. It just makes you feel like there's hope.
There is hope.
Want to share it with you.
Well, you are, because we're up in the 50s, the 60s. However, the other night, I'm lying in bed watching television, and all of a sudden, the house starts shaking. I mean, the entire house, and we have a fortress, as you know.
Right.
Walls are so thick, and this house was shaking like it was made out of matchsticks. And I turned to my husband, I'm like, that's a tornado. And I'm getting up, getting ready to run to the basement, and he starts laughing at me, right? Of course. He's, oh.
It's a guy thing. He doesn't want you to know he's scared too.
Well,
right?
it's like, no, he wasn't scared. He was just, no, that's not a tornado, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next morning, and thank God it didn't last very long. It just lasted for a few minutes and it stopped. The next morning, we get up and he looks outside, and one of our outbuildings has been lifted up off its foundation and moved.
Oh, that's weird.
Like it was made out of paper. And there were 50-foot trees that were uprooted. Just like a big hand came down and just pulled them out like it was a weed. Yes. And
well, you know, that's strange because you got that. And then yesterday, my hometown, they had a tornado go through it. And many of the buildings have been put in pretty bad shape, and nursing home and roads, it's a mess. But they only lost one life, thank God.
Oh, it's terrible. Well, the power of that wind is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And
scary.
It is. And thank goodness it was what we had, I believe, was a mini tornado. It was like what they call a wind shear. And it just hit in this certain area. But there was a tornado that landed in Conway, Massachusetts. And
there's a lot of them going on right now.
Damage. Yes, I know. And then a friend of mine on Facebook said the sirens were going off in Tennessee. So, yeah, it really, really wild weather, but thank goodness we're all okay
for
the moment.
Good. How did your dogs react to it? Did they give any warning? They slept through it. Oh, nothing like help.
Well, it's good they did, because if they got nervous, then I would have been nervous, and like better that nobody was nervous. I just knew it was something to pay attention to.
But usually they would react to something. So the fact that they didn't, they were very calm, very cool.
Yes. They were calm, cool, and collected, which is very good. So that was my venture last weekend. And what's going on numerologically? Here we are in the midst of all this wild weather. What's happening?
Well, today is the first day of our 4-month. The 4-month, I don't care what your personal year is, the 4-month deals with details of things, getting things wrapped up. It is... everybody's going to be huffing and puffing. Remember to take deep breaths. Breathe in the good air, exhale the bad air to give yourself a chance to calm down, because you're going to find that people are going to be very fault-finding and bitchy. I don't care who you have around you, you're going to feel uptight or tense. So allow yourself, like I said, breathe deep, let this happen to help you, regardless, as I said, what your personal year is. It's going to affect all of us because it's about details and about work. Dig the ditch, things of that nature. It's going to be a lot better than trying to party your plate, because that's not going to work well at all. But one thing in your favor is, I don't care who you are, get any appointments that you have to make. Perfect time to do that, because 4 deals with health. So make your
Ah.
dental appointment, get your health appointment, get that stuff taken care of. And then you're lined up and things will really work out better. And in fact, we were talking, Patricia, what about if someone had a question or two about their numbers, letting us know?
Yes, we want to hear from you. So feel free to email us or just send us a message on Facebook that you want a question answered. Maybe it's about your name or your birth date, and PK will answer it on the air.
Yeah, but we'll do it next week. Give us during the week, and then the next time we're on, we'll take care of it.
Yeah, we will answer your questions.
Yeah.
How about it? That sounds like fun to me. I like
I
it.
think it'll be fun. It'll be good for them because they'll get the information that's personally theirs.
Exactly. And you're offering some classes starting up pretty soon, right?
Yes, in 2 weeks' time on the 18th, I'm going to start my first full-fledged numerology class. It's going to be the beginner's class, but it's going to be 3 intensive hours, and it's going to encompass so much. They're going to be surprised what they'll know when the class is over.
Now, you have to be in person for this one. You're not on
Yes,
the
this
internet
one
yet,
is in
please.
person, but I will be eventually doing it on internet. But right now, there's going to be 3 different classes, beginners, intermediate, and advanced. But the first one will be on the 18th, and then it will be available after that. We're talking about putting something together on Skype.
Good. That'll be fun and incredibly useful, especially in these crazy times.
Oh, God,
So-
yes.
Geez, we've got some interesting paranormal news, don't we?
Yes, we do. You come up with some of the darndest things. I look at it and I go,
I'm telling you
find this?
what. You're right. And here's the first one. The Walking Dead. Do you watch that?
once in a while.
It's a tough one to watch sometimes.
I know. It's a little above my my mind grade.
You got to kind of gird your loins for it. It's one of those things that you just got to go, oh my God, I don't know if I can take it, but you got to watch it earlier in the night so you don't have nightmares. But anyways, they had a scene that they filmed just recently and it aired. And guess what was in the background?
I saw it.
The UFO.
That's right. Incredible. It's so much there they
clear.
can't deny it. Yeah,
It's so
exactly.
funny. It went right across the screen. And guess what? If you want to see that, you got to go to our Facebook page, Supernatural Girlz on Facebook. Take a look at it. We want to know what you think. I think it's a UFO. I really do.
If
So-
it isn't, it's one heck of a bird.
The bird from the prehistoric times.
Exactly.
And he was flying in a perfectly straight line. That was great. So anyways, take a look at that on our Supernatural Girlz Facebook page. While you're there, give us a like and follow us so you can stay in touch with all the great things that we find and post just for you. Now, the other thing is also interesting. There was a pilot who was silenced after releasing UFO footage online. So the powers that be, they're still wanting to put the kibosh on all of this stuff. Don't talk about it. So this pilot, he works for a private corporation. His wife is also in the aviation industry, and both of them had these photographs and videos, and they were putting them up on their own page. And then the hammer fell on both their heads, and they were told, take all of this down. So they did. Unfortunately, I guess he was threatened with losing his job and possibly other things as well that would have been even more unfortunate. So he was forced to take it all down. So I guess the powers that be don't like it when credible sources are posting things like this.
Well, it makes people stop and think, and that's scary. How dare we think?
I know. We're not supposed to think. Gosh, I forgot about that.
I knew you did. I could hear it in your voice.
Just forgot about it. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So anyways, you can also see a video on the Supernatural Girlz Facebook page about this. It'll give you all the information, who this person is, and the kinds of things they were posting. And it's very interesting. Take a look at it. It's right there for you to see. Follow us on Twitter. We've got Melissa tweeting away all week long and tonight during the show. And again, it's just, we really love to hear from our audience. So be sure to email us your questions for PK, anything to do with numerology. She'll be happy to answer them. And tonight, we've got a very interesting guest, do we not?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. From right down the road.
From right down the road from you in Tucson. See?
Yeah. How about that?
Gosh, of all things. So tonight we have on our show John DeSouza, and now he was an FBI special agent for over 20 years and collector of the real X-Files. I can't wait to dig into this with him. I know you're waiting, chomping at the bit, too. He has researched and uncovered paranormal experiences as they have been revealed to him. Now, he's also trained as an attorney and investigating official of the U.S. government. So he unravels mysteries that elude other investigators who are restricted to the purely material world. And, you know, we're not restricted to that. So he devotes himself now to his companies, to writing books on spiritual and paranormal topics. He has 2 books we're going to be talking about tonight, The Para Investigators and his new book, Extradimensionals. So we got a lot to find out from John, so I'm not going to waste any more time chatting away. Let's just bring him on the show.
Right.
John, welcome to the show.
Hello, Patricia, PK. Oh, it's great to be on here with you on Supernatural Girlz. I'm so happy to be on with you guys. It's great.
Well, we're happy to have you. You're quite the celebrity. You've got a lot of controversial things going on with your experiences, and we want to get into all of this with you, but let's first start with you personally, because you had an interesting early life where you lived in a haunted house and you had experiences with all kinds of things that go bump in the night.
That is true. Well, for your listeners, my name is John DeSouza. I was an FBI agent FBI special agent for over 20 years. During that time, I was involved in the war on terrorism and violent crimes and things of that sort. And during that time, I also collected what I call the real X-Files, which I share with people in my books. And part of that is when I was growing up, as you referred to, Patricia, I grew up in New York City in kind of a rundown neighborhood on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I actually grew up in what I can only describe as a haunted building. It was kind of like a tenement building when I was little. And this building was like a morphogenic energy site. It was a place where there was all kinds of paranormal phenomena that occurred as I was growing up. And I'm talking spiritual stuff, alien visitor type stuff, all kinds of paranormal phenomena would happen in that building. It was amazing, and it was something that really taught me to cope with that sort of thing at a very, very early age. It was really, really something, yes.
Now, did you come from a family where this kind of thing was in your lineage, or was somebody who had like the psychic grandmother or something like that?
Well, my mom was a very powerful psychic when I was growing up. Not a very reluctant psychic, I should say. She was not somebody who looked for that sort of thing or wanted that sort of thing at all. But she actually was pretty amazing. But there wasn't that, if you're asking about that intergenerational experiences type of thing, no, I did not see evidence of that. As a matter of fact, my own experiences cut off after a certain age. And I think around the age of 9 or 10 years old, and I didn't have further experiences after that.
Wow. So it just stopped.
Pretty much, yeah. And when I was about, and I recount this in my first book, The Para Investigators. When I was about, I'd say 9 years old, I went with my parents, took me to a festival, like a party out in the city, and it was a wedding reception, big party, hundreds of people in a rented hall, just having a great time. And then I was with a bunch of little kids my own age. All the little kids from the gathering got together and went out into the night, kind of escaped from everybody. And we all went out and started playing. And it had to be about 1 a.m. It was probably the latest all of us had ever stayed up. And we were just running around, dodging each other, tagging each other. And one kid just hit me in the stomach, and I went down on the sidewalk. Another kid said, "Oh my gosh, he's really hurt." And so they did what little kids did. They ran away, and they all ran back to the
Oh my
back to the hall. So I was on my back on the sidewalk looking up between the two tallest buildings I'd ever seen. And it was a very starry night, just a beautiful starry night. And there were stars everywhere except where I was looking directly up between these two buildings. There was an area of just blackness for some reason. And as I looked closer, it appeared to be sort of like a black ink cloud, like the kind of squid would give off in the water when you're trying to grab them. And it was this giant sort of black ink cloud, and suddenly from the bottom of this big inky cloud came a saucer. It was like a flying saucer type thing, and it just came down. It was probably like judging maybe 50 feet in diameter. It was coming down with spinning lights on the bottom. It appeared sort of metallic, and it just came down towards me. And by this time I was on my feet. I was looking up at it, and two teenage girls appeared on my left side, and they were looking up at the same thing and screaming and crying and grabbing each other. And one of them yelled at me, "Little boy, you better run home. The world might be ending."
Oh my goodness.
Then the thing kept coming down, and then the two girls on my left disappeared. I don't know what happened to them, if they ran, but if they did, they ran really fast because they just disappeared. And then I just kept looking up at the thing, and then suddenly both me and the vehicle changed our minds at the same second. I took a step back, and the thing reversed course. And this was after I felt like a spotlight come down on me. It felt like a spotlight. And it was at that moment that we both changed our minds. And the thing's reverse course started going back up. And like a cartoon character jumps in the hole, pulls the hole in after it, the thing went back in the cloud, and then the cloud disappeared. It was gone. And that was it. I ran back to the rented hall where my parents were. I tried to explain to my parents what had just happened. They really weren't that interested. They told me not to talk about that stuff at all, especially in front of other people, especially. And that was my very first experience with really sort of like a contact observation experience that I had when I was about the age of 9, I would say.
Oh, were you scared?
Oh, I was terrified. I was terrified, but very intrigued at the same time.
So you had a lot of adventures when you were young. Now, you became an FBI agent, and you started collecting these real-life X-files while you were an agent. And the Pair Investigators, it has some wonderful stories in it. Everybody should read it. It was really interesting. But one of the stories that just totally blew my mind was the one about the two policemen who went to check on an elderly man. Can you tell our audience that story? Because PK and I were talking about it earlier. We were just spellbound by that story. It has such an unexpected twist in it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. And that's a story that has been floating around among like Eastern law enforcement. And actually, no, I think it's Midwest law enforcement for many, many years. And most people think that it's probably just an urban legend. But I actually spoke to the officers who were involved, and they were really very, very impacted by what they experienced. And to this day, they remembered the experience as if it just happened. And it was basically
through it. Yeah, this was a wild one.
Yes. And it was an experience I call it the blue jacket. And it's basically the story of two officers who, and I think one of them passed away by now, the older gentleman, but it was two officers who responded to a call. And many people are familiar with pieces of the story, but very few are familiar with the entire story. They responded to a call that was based on a little old man who was missing inside of a residential neighborhood. And he was a little old man who was always present, always helping his neighbors, always out and about. He was a very sociable type, very sociable. And he was very good at spending time with others. So when he just disappeared for like a week, they called the police to do a wellness check on him, what's called a wellness check. And the police, a younger officer and an older officer, responded. They came to his door. They went to the door and they tried to actually decide what to do, because they could see something from the windows. They could see that it appeared something was maybe laying down. There was a cat in there, and there may have been something laying down further down in the kitchen. So they decided, okay, we've got to probably break this door, and we have no other way in, because they had tried the windows and so forth. And so they were just about to start breaking the door, and a little old man opens the front door. And the two officers kind of looked at each other, and they kind of felt like they were teenagers caught doing something wrong. They muttered something to the older man. It was an old white-haired man that answered the door, and the old man just said to them, "He's in the back. Go look." And they just kind of stopped what they were doing. They listened to what the little old man told them and went towards the back. And yeah, sure enough, in the kitchen, there was a little old man laying on the kitchen floor. But then they noticed it looked exactly like the man who just answered the door. Same jacket, same blue jacket, same markings on the jacket.
Yeah, what was it? A sports team, like the Cubs or something like that?
Yes, it was like the New York Giants or something.
The Cubs,
And so then they examined, and they said it's the same man who answered the door. So they started calling out for the man. They saw that the man on the floor had been deceased for quite a while. So there was no reviving that was going to happen. Some time had passed. I mean, it was some significant time. So they started calling out for it had to be the man's twin brother. That's what they were doing. They were calling out for him. They were saying, we got to get the old man's twin. And they're calling out. Apparently he's not in the house. Then they went out through the front door, and they started calling out, sir, calling out for the man who opened the door. They kept on doing that, and they noticed something strange outside. It appeared the neighborhood had just gone dark, the older officer said, listen, there's nothing. There's no sounds. Their radios had stopped. Their car radio had stopped also. There was no sound. The houses were all dark when they didn't appear that way when they arrived. There was nothing going on in the neighborhood. I mean, they couldn't even hear birds, and everything appeared dark. It was very, very strange to them. And so they didn't know what to do, but they were starting to feel like something was terribly wrong. The older officer said to the younger officer, something's really bad. We're someplace where we're not supposed to be, and we need to get back to where we were. And the younger man felt himself also feeling as if he was moving very slowly, like he was very, like he was trying to walk through molasses. And everything was dark, and wasn't this way when they got there. And so they ultimately went back to the front door where they started this whole thing. And the officers just said a prayer for the little old man's soul, for his restfulness. And they put their hands on each other and on the door and just said a prayer. And then they heard something. They heard someone saying, okay. And they looked up, and it was like they were waking up from a stupor. They looked up, and it was one of the neighbors. And he was saying, "Are you guys okay? You've been standing here for a very long time."
Oh, my God.
He said, "You guys were supposed to go check inside." And the young officer looked at him and said, "We've been all through the inside. The little old man's laying dead for a long time in the back kitchen." He said, "You have not been inside." The neighbor said, "I put a piece of tape across the front with a note telling you guys to check this house, and the tape hasn't been broken. You guys have not been inside. You've been standing at this door for half an hour."
Oh, good grief.
And they were watching the police just stand there, right?
Yes, and they were very alarmed and very scared. And they didn't know what to do for a long time. And they never really, and at that time, of course, a sergeant showed up in a separate car. He was very upset because they had not been answering their radios. And so they just kind of sat it out while other officers did the work, and they tried to figure out what just happened. And
great story. God.
Yeah.
I'm sure it changed their lives forever.
Oh, yes, it always does.
Yeah.
Everyone in the para-investigators are all officers that had paranormal experiences, and their lives were changed forever. That's the para-investigative shift that happens.
Amazing. Oh, my goodness.
How many times, John, do you feel that when they get into that shift, that it pulls them in a more positive way versus a negative?
I'd say it's 50-50 if you really want to know, because...
Well, that's what I want. Because, it depends. Everyone's a little different in how they relate to it.
Yeah, because... and also, I think destiny has a lot to do with it as well. Like, you have somebody in the chat room there, Starlight, and she's asking about destiny, who's destined to do what. And there's a story in the Para-Investigators that is about the gray baby. It's called The Gray Baby. And that is a story that's a story that turned out kind of bad for the officer. And it's because he was a state trooper in Desert Town out here around the Southwest. And he was out there doing his job, looking for speeders. And he comes across a Chevy that was going over 100. That it was just tear through his little hidey hole. And he pursued it, and he stopped the car. And this story it's really crazy, but he stops the car and he walks up to it, and he felt as if he stepped through a vapor, like a cold vapor that just made all the hairs on his neck stand up, and is on his arms as well. And he tried to keep his composure, walked up to the car, which had open windows, and he looked in, and there was no one in the driver's seat or the front seat.
Oh, wow.
So right away, that puts a little alarm on him. Mm-hmm. And then he looks into the back seat, and there's something in the back seat that looks like a living skeleton. And it's holding something in its arms. And he doesn't know what it is, but he puts his hand on his gun, he's trying to be restrained still, even though all of his alarms are up. They're all up. And he puts his hand on his gun, and he says, "I got to see your hands. You've got to hold out your hands. I have to see your hands." And from the back, something with unnaturally long arms. Well, something from the back curls up a long bony finger to its lips and tells him, "Shh, you're going to wake the baby." In a loud whisper, raspy whisper. And he says, "Miss," he's guessing it's a woman. He says, "Miss, you got to stop. You got to lean forward. You got to show me your hands. I got to know what you're doing." And apparently she must have been the one driving the car. And she said, "Shh, you're going to wake the baby." And he says, "Show me your hands right now. I'm going to drag you out of that thing." And then she says she takes arms that are very long and just thrusts forward this swaddled baby that apparently has been dead for so long that it's actually gray in color.
Ugh.
There's a trickle of blood.
Scary.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have to just take a very short commercial break right here. And so we're on the edge of our seats with you, John, to hear the rest of this one.
Good planning here.
God, this poor police officer. Woo. What a trip he's on. Okay, so everybody, we are going to come back in just a couple minutes. We are speaking tonight with John DeSouza, who was an FBI special agent for over 20 years and the collector of the real X-Files. So stay tuned, everybody. You are listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio, and we will be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker. I'm here with my co-host, PK, and our terrific guest tonight, John DeSouza, a former FBI special agent and a collector of the real life X-Files. We're on the edge of our seats hearing about the gray baby here, John. So let's go on with this story. This poor police officer who encounters this. Oh, my God.
Okay,
Please
so
tell us the rest of the story.
So let me just say this was I think I call him Trooper Lopez. He was a very big old burly super macho state trooper, and out in Desert Town, and he was walking up to this Chevy that he had stopped going over 100 miles an hour, and they had pulled over to the sandy shoulder, and the windows were open, like I said, and he was walking up to it. He felt like he stepped through a cold vapor. He felt very strange and weird, and it's like everything just kind of changed colors when that happened to him. But he soldiered on up to the window. He looked in the front seat. There's nothing there. So he said to himself, okay, they jumped in the back seat and they're playing games here. And sure enough, in the back seat, there was some kind of skeletal thing back there that was holding a bundle in its hands. And he said to the thing, whatever that was, he said, you have to show me your hands. The thing says to him, shh, you're going to wake the baby, in a loud, raspy sort of whisper. And then he says, you got to show me your hands. And these unnaturally long arms just jut forward with this swaddled thing that appears to be a baby swaddled in a real wraparound blanket there. And it comes forward, and apparently what really hit him, even before the vision of this gray baby with this little trickle of dried blood down from the sides of its mouth, and apparently been dead for a long time, but before the impact, the visual impact, he said there was a wall of stench that hit him and buckled his knees. He said it was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was like, he said the smell was so rank and putrid that it was like he'd been hit with a wall of just horrible, menacing smell. He said it actually made his eyes tear up, and his skin, he felt it on his skin as well. And he said that thing that she had jut out towards his face must have been dead for a very long, long time. And he just backed up. He shouted to the woman, stay in the car, don't move, keep your hands out, don't move. He said, when that thing was thrust forward into his face, he felt like it crashed right through into his consciousness. That's what he felt like. And he just looked at it. It was just
scary.
It was just an inch from his face, and he just felt like it wasn't dead. That was the sense he got when it was just into his face. He backed up towards his car, and he screaming for her to stay, don't move, don't stay. He jumped for his car radio. He called everybody. He called everyone who would respond. His department, local PD department. He called ambulance response. He called anyone that could come. And then he stayed at his car. And apparently the lady, the woman who had been in the back with the baby was just very happy to stay right where she was. But truthfully, she could have gotten out of that car and walked right into the forest with the gray baby if she'd wanted to, because Trooper Lopez was not going to move a muscle to stop her. He was in shock, in a sense that beyond what physically happened. He was in some kind of shock, and he just stayed next to his car, and he opened the back car door to shield his vision from her and from the back seat of that car. And then he just stayed there until everybody responded. And people from his department came, local PD came, ambulance response came to see. They were just told possible fatality. And the woman was just as meek as a lamb the entire time. And when he physically saw her, she looked like a living skeleton. Apparently, Caucasian female, looked like a living skeleton with the baby, and she never really raised her voice above a whisper until the medics pried the gray baby away from her, and she began to scream and yell and become violent. I mean, as violent as a 90-pound emaciated female could become. And she just became violent, and she screamed top of her lungs, "Don't take our baby. Don't take our baby." And that was the only time he looked up, and he looked directly into her eyes, and it was like hollow, vacant stare, and her eyes locked onto his at that moment when she was screaming, "Don't take our baby," because he got the feeling in that moment that she was talking about that he was now a partial owner of the gray baby at that moment.
I say, gosh, how spooky. What was her story? I mean, what was her deal?
Well, people from his department came over to him finally after a while, and they were very happy to come and talk to him because they could see he was really out of it. And they were very happy to come on over to him and do the macho police thing and say, "Hey, guy, listen, just cheer up. There was nothing that could have been done to save that baby. That baby died. You know, they're saying that baby died, weeks ago. It was a long time ago, and there was nothing you could have done. So don't feel bad. Don't feel upset." And they said to him, just buck up. This was basically, it was a shootout at a drug house that had occurred like a state and a half away from where they were. And there was, and the woman had escaped the shootout. And this was a couple of days ago. The woman had escaped the shootout. She basically grabbed the baby, which the baby was already dead from neglect at that time. She swaddled the baby and took it in the car and had been driving for about 2 days at the time that she met up with him. So his compatriots, his officers, felt like he was upset because there was a dead baby there, and he kind of told them that he was okay, he was fine, but what he didn't tell them was he wasn't concerned about the baby at all. He really wasn't. What he was concerned about was that he felt something from that baby. He felt that baby was not dead at all, that it was animated with a very living, evil presence that had drawn him to that spot, and that precisely because he had a secret, and his secret was that he was a psychically sensitive, I don't know how else to describe it. He was psychically sensitive individual, Maybe he had abilities as well, but he was exactly the type of person who would be susceptible to this entity that was, according to him, that he felt was animating the gray baby. And for many, after that scene was over, and for many nights after that incident, he had many nights where he replayed that scene in his mind, in his dreams, visions, and every single time the same thing would play out, except that the gray babies, when it was thrust forward into his face, its eyes would open, it would reach out for him, and it would speak to him. And that happened to him for many, many nights. And he was never the same after that. Never the same.
Sounds like he may have had an emotional breakdown after that.
Yeah, because you said he went out on leave after that. So
yeah, pretty much. It was something that impacted him to such a degree. It was something he could never explain to other officers. It was something that they would never understand. But the gray baby entered his life at that time and he felt like it would never leave him again.
Sad. That
very
is so sad.
spooky story, yes, and very sad because it just changed him. And there's that other 50% you mentioned, John, where it went the other way. It wasn't a good thing for this police officer. How sad. But let's get into a couple other, things, because you've got a different take on a lot of things. These extradimensionals that you've written about in your new book, which is very interesting. But before we go there is a question that I want to ask you from Trisha in the chat room. She wants to know, are officers becoming a bit more comfortable with talking about their paranormal experiences without fear of jeopardizing their job?
I don't really think so. That was one of the reasons why I wrote the Para Investigators, because I don't think they really can, unless they have somebody like me who is already open to that sort of thing. Because I often describe that paranormal experiences as toothpaste, that once that gets out of the tube, you can't get that back in again. And even talking to like departmental psychologists or something like that, when you talk about the big police departments, that's something that I don't see them doing that sort of thing. I don't see them coming forward with that. There's a very, very materialistic sort of, overly materialistic kind of culture around law enforcement. And I don't really think they can overcome the stigma that is based on.
Yeah, that sounds right. It's still a very touchy thing. So in your new book, The Extradimensionals, you write about a wide variety of phenomena, and you identify it quite differently. So tell us, first of all, what are extradimensionals?
Oh, in my new book, The Extradimensionals, I write about this theory that is like a bad penny, keeps coming back to ufology about every 20 years or so. It's the idea that, according to, after investigating a lot of cases and looking at and researching so many of these cases, sometimes if you come with a different perspective, you come to different conclusions. And what I have seen is that there's a very great likelihood that alien visitors that are the true cases, the real cases, taking away the 95% of sightings and UFO contact cases that turn out not to be real or not to be genuine, not to be extraterrestrial in nature, but taking that small percentage of cases that are actually unexplainable and very possibly supernatural. If you look at those very carefully, it seems to me very possible that alien visitors are not physical at all, that they never have been, and that they are actually coming here from other dimensions outside of our time and space, and that they are able to be physical for short periods of time, and then they dematerialize back to wherever they came from. And so that's what extradimensionality is. And it's an idea that's been around for a long time. Jacques Vallée and many other great thinkers have also said that the alien visitor phenomena, it acts more like a spiritistic phenomena, not a physical. Because if it were physical, they would basically, there's so much of it, and the phenomena is growing all the time, that they would basically be having a parade on the White House lawn. They'd be all over the place because they haven't solved this problem of being physical on a permanent basis, they can't do that because they are extra-dimensional in nature.
Interesting.
That comes from a few different places. Yeah.
Now, with this understanding of extra dimensionals, wasn't there a CIA or FBI report saying that the government knew about this, that they knew about the extra dimensionals?
Absolutely.
Or they call them interdimensionals, I think, in the report.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, if your listeners if they're Googling me, they can go to vault.fbi.gov. And that is the repository on the net where the FBI dumps all of their declassified documents. As a matter of fact, all government agencies across the Western world, they're all doing this. They're all dumping out their declassified documents onto the net. And this one is at the vault.fbi.gov. And there's thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of documents out there. And if you go to that site and you click on unexplained phenomena, there's a section there about the JFK assassination. There's a section for about cattle mutilations, about all kinds of unknown phenomena, of supernatural phenomena too. And there is one section there you can click on UFO. And if you click on the letters UFO, you'll come up with the whole group of documents. But on the left side, the first group of UFO documents starts in 1947. And if you click on that first group of documents there on the left, then you can go to page 22. And on page 22, there's a document that is called a Memorandum of Importance. And it is dated July 8th, 1947. And it is a document. It's just a one page with almost no strikeouts at all. And it's basically a memorandum written from an FBI supervisor to the scientific community to advise them of what he is being told about alien visitors. And it's where I got the title for my book as well, because he says in that document that he has a source, an informant. And he says his informant is supernormal, which is an old-timey word that just means supernatural. So he couldn't tell us the name of the informant, but he told us what kind of thing the informant is. To me, it makes it look like the informant was also an alien visitor, because that's what the context tells us. And the context is that he gives us about 8 or 9 conclusions that were told to him by this source, this informant that was giving him this information. And one of them is that alien visitors are not physical. They are coming here from other dimensions. They appear, they achieve, they can be physical for short periods of time, and then they go back to the dimensions that they come from. He also calls them talas. That's an old Vedic term for different dimensions of reality. He says alien visitors are able to change their vibration, their vibratory rate, whatever that means, and in order to achieve the vibratory rate of our physicality, our physical universe. And then they're here for short periods of time, and they can do what they have to do, and then they dematerialize back to where the planes of reality they come from. It also says in this document that there's nobody in there. The UFOs are empty. They are somehow controlled. Some sort of remote control operates them. But alien visitors are not like us. They're not piling themselves into vehicles, into metal shells, and sailing across the galaxies and then just showing up here. That's not how it works. He's telling us they just appear here, and the UFOs are separate from the alien visitors and accompany them. He says a bunch of other things like the UFOs are made out of a kind of radiant energy. I call that plasmas. That's why I refer to them as plasmas. He says they're not really metal. That's why a lot of times they appear to be made of light or have a tremendous amount of light coming out of them. And then he says they're just not like humans at all. And he says their technology is so far ahead of ours that if our Air Force were to try to take them down or attack them, it would be tragic. He says it would be terribly tragic, and it would be a big mistake.
Well, let me just ask you for a second here, John. Let me bust in here and ask you this. I mean, at the same time, we do have really credible people like Travis Walton, who's been on our show, and talking about his experience. Mm-hmm. And that sounded very physical to me, especially, the way he got caught up in the energy field of that ship, which was, Absolutely. I believe, unintentional. Absolutely. And so he goes aboard this ship, and he is a pretty cranky guy, and he didn't like the fact that he was there, and he tries to beat him up. And I think he was one of the few that actually broke the restraints and scared them more than anything. And so here's something where you have a real physicality to an experience with what appears to be extraterrestrials. Now, I don't doubt that they can be extra-dimensional too. I mean, why not both, right? And of course, yes, and of course, you're right. They are physical, very physical, and the argument here is that they're physical for short periods of time because they are able to achieve physicality. And I'm glad you brought up Travis Walton's case, because if you look on my book on the cover of the Extradimensionals, it's actually a picture of a new witness that came out on the Travis Walton case. For your listeners who may not know, Travis Walton was an individual who was in his very early 20s, who was with a logging crew out in a national park in Arizona, Sitgraves National Park, Arizona. He was with a logging crew. They finished a very long day of work. He was in a clearing. His friends, they were all taken off in a pickup truck. They piled up into a truck, and they were leaving for the day when this a giant sort of plasma vehicle appears above the tree line in the clearing. It was filled with like yellow white light sort of, and it was hovering up there, just hovering. And Travis foolishly leaves the truck. He runs underneath it, and then he is struck down dead. I don't know how long ago you had Travis on, but he's come to the conclusion that he probably was absolutely dead when they struck him down. And I believe that's also true. And he was on the ground, and of course his friends took off in the truck. Now, there's another witness who was in the military at the time who was in the forest hunting. And it was, even though it was nighttime, he was in the forest with his wife. And as he emerged from the forest, just as all this was going on, he looks to his right and he sees this truck peeling out like a bat out of hell. It's just taking off there, tires squealing, with a bunch of guys inside, sounding like they were screaming. Then he looks to his left, and he said he saw a very young, skinny young man being pulled up into the bottom of a ship. It was in a track, sort of like a beam of light, and he was being pulled up. And he says it was unlike anything he'd ever seen, because there was no stress points on the outside of the clothing at all. It was just as if he was being pulled up from the inside out, just perfectly even. And if you look on the cover of my book, The Extradimensionals, the exact scene that witness says that he saw is on my book. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, it was a fascinating experience that Travis had. And from what he told us that night on the show, he certainly holds no animosity towards the extraterrestrials that picked him up. He thinks they saved his life. Exactly. And that he had just done something so incredibly stupid while his friends were scared out of their wits and screaming at him to get back in the truck. Of course, he didn't listen. So it's an amazing story, but he certainly had positive feelings towards them now that he's looking back on it at this stage in his life. It was a really amazing experience that he had, being gone for what, 5 days, was it, John?
Yes, it was. And
Yeah.
for a long time, people who have investigated this case are always wondering why this case, Travis Walton's case, didn't fit into the pattern of all other alien abduction cases. It didn't fit at all, and it's never been repeated this way ever again.
Well, I think it was more accidental, don't you?
Exactly. The reason is because it wasn't an alien abduction at all. It was a rescue operation where they took off in this vehicle, took off, and he was struck dead on the ground by some kind of energy bolt that accidentally came out.
Right. Well, hang on to that thought, because we got to come back to this. We're going to have to take another very short commercial break, everybody. But we are speaking with John DeSouza, a former FBI special agent, and he's a collector of the real X-Files. We are digging deep tonight to find the truth about all this. So stay tuned, everybody. You are listening to Supernatural Girlz Radio, and we will be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Supernatural Girlz Radio. I'm your host, Patricia Baker. I am here with my co-host, PK, and our amazing guest tonight. He's got the best stories. John DeSouza. He was an FBI special agent for over 20 years and a collector of the real X-Files. And we're just finishing up on the Travis Walton story, which you're saying was not an extraterrestrial experience, which shocks me. It shocks me, John.
Yes. And, it's just a Travis Walton experience. I feel like it reinforces my theory of extradimensionals because for a couple of different reasons. One reason is he materialized aboard this thing where he was supposedly on a ship, but shortly after that, they revived him. He had some kind of device on his chest. He was possibly dead, and they did rescue him and probably brought him back to life, most likely. And then he had his little tussle with the three little grays, but then he got kind of free and took a sort of like a tour of the area he was in, and then he was picked up by like three sort of Nordic beings as well, then he got a bigger tour. So my point is this: I don't think he was aboard that little ship that they saw from the ground, because that was like about approximately maybe 50 feet in diameter. But the tour he took,
it's bigger on the inside, right?
Well, yeah, wow, by a lot, because the tour he took him from one chamber to a larger chamber, then to a larger open area, and it just went on and on and on. And so there was not a physical correlation. That's what I'm saying. The laws of physics kind of break down when you have these experiences with extradimensionals, and physicality doesn't seem to apply. And then the other thing that I had with Travis Walton's experience was that I believe that very possibly there are no alien races, and that they just don't really exist. And the reason is because, and one of the anecdotes that adds to this theory of mine is because those three grays that Travis saw in his first period that he was with them, they had very, very similar behavior patterns and very similar modus operandi to the three sort of tall Nordic beings that then he came in touch with later. I believe that those three grays just went back and changed clothing. It was like changing clothing into the guise of a different type of alien visitor.
So that's a totally different take on a lot of these things, isn't it, PK? Huh?
Yeah. Definitely. It's almost like an illusion. Everything is an illusion.
And I think they change species according to what's most appropriate to the situation. Travis was being difficult, and those little grays were not going to be able to do anything with him. So they changed into these giant, tall, very muscular Nordic sort of beings that then had very little trouble doing exactly the same thing that the three Greys
Yeah, I
were
think
trying
they
to do.
looked more human, right? And they had those
Right.
piercing blue eyes that were weird looking.
Right.
Well, here's a question for you from Galaxy Girl. She would like to know, have you ever had top security clearance?
Yes, everyone who claims to be an FBI agent or FBI agent or CIA, whatever, will always have top secret security clearance, and they maintain that during the expanse of their career for the whole time.
And there's a lot of different levels to that, aren't there? It's not just one. There's many.
There are many, but they tend to fall under top secret is usually the highest that is needed by an FBI agent or by most special agents in the security field for the most part. Because then beyond that, once you get into the other levels of secrecy, there's compartments so that there's other lateral levels of security where things can be kept secret from other agencies through secret compartments, sort of, where they're declared as separate secrecy levels that are so super secret that now we have to give it a new name and keep it in this one sort of compartment. So there's a lot of that too.
Well, they've got a lot of secrets for the secrets, keeping the secrets, right?
Yes, and they're mostly just keeping the secrets from each other, all the different agents.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
That's the ironic part. How do your friends feel about your interest in this particular subject?
Oh, you mean as far as people in government or?
Right,
they're just very surprised and very amazed at my persistence in working in this field. Although they had a good idea. I mean, that's how I got the name X-Man as a nickname, which was not a compliment back in the 90s when I was working a lot of big cases, and the X-Files show came out, and I was a big fan of the X-Files show. And then there was like a little minor scandal in the FBI because it was found out that Chris Carter, the guy who created the X-Files, had somebody consulting with him who was an FBI person, because he had a lot of procedures and he had a lot of information that was kind of sort of inside sort of. And so Chris Carter was questioned about that. He said he thought, and he talks about this today, the maker, the guy who made the X-Files. And I was also questioned as to whether I was having any contact with them, and I was able to say no, I was not. But it was too late. I was already given the nickname X-Man. So,
Well,
so they had an idea to answer your question. They had an idea that I.
They certainly did. Here's a question for you. We were talking about this off the air, and I think the audience would like to know more about this because you have interesting information about the Men in Black and what they're made of. Would you share that with everybody? I think they'll be surprised.
Sure. I mean, there's the Men in Black are the sort of shadowy kind of group that tend to visit people who have had genuine paranormal UFO experiences, whether you're talking about contact experiences or even abduction experiences, but the ones that are the real experiences. We're not talking about 95% that turn out to be not true for one reason or another. But they seem to get these contacts from these mysterious figures that we know of as the Men in Black. Of course, the great expert in this area would be Nick Redfern, who writes some great books in this area. And there's several theories as to who the Men in Black really are. I mean, my own theory is the actual genuine Men in Black. I mean, any intelligence agency can dress guys up in black suits and send them forward to go hassle some poor experiencer. But the Men in Black that are genuinely seem to have some kind of supernatural quality to them,
right?
Those ones, the theory that I see as the most credible is that they are from global structures, they're from global shops, not from national agencies, but some sort of global agencies that are just exercising control and who have a big interest in keeping awakening from happening. And I think the strongest theory I've seen is that they are actually very possibly reanimated corpses.
Blah! That is disgusting. Wow.
Guess who's coming to dinner?
That is horrible.
Yeah.
Reanimated human corpses?
Yeah, there's some sort of radiation is used somehow to reanimate them.
Ugh.
And
Do they have an odor to them as well?
I believe they do. I mean, and they can cover that up, just like they cover up their eyes, because corpses, the eyes tend to glaze over, and there's some things you just can't stop from happening, no matter what kind of biological chemicals they're using to get these things going. So yeah, that to me that appears the strongest theory out of all the theories about the Men in Black. So just don't open your door. If you've been an experiencer and you've been getting some clues over the phone and over in other methods of communication that somebody's interested in questioning you, and and also don't trust credentials of anybody. Anybody can claim to be from intelligence agency.
True.
And be anybody that they can. And so we always have to ask for, what do we ask for, ladies?
The badge number.
That's it, the badge number. Every single, anybody who claims to be from any agency at all has to have their badge number, and they have it memorized. They know what it is, and if they don't remember it, they can just look in their badge and they can see what it is. It's usually a 5-digit number or a 6-digit number, and everyone.
Couldn't they just give you any number?
Because then you can take that badge number, and it's public information for purposes of verification. That's the whole point of the badge number. Okay. That's why they gave it to you. You can actually go on the internet and use a badge number from a particular agency to verify, or you can call that department and say, I've got this guy here. His badge number is such and such. His name is such and such. And then they can say, yes, that's our guy. We sent him there. We're real. We're not reanimated corpses.
Well, people do describe Men in Black as being very pasty in their skin color. But the other thing that's strange about them, and in the descriptions that we hear over and over again, is that they're wearing outdated clothing. Back from whatever, I don't know, 50s, 60s. Why? Why would they dress these Men in Black reanimated corpses up like that? Why not give them normal clothes?
I would say from what I could see is they're generating these things in another part of the world where, I don't know how much you guys have traveled, but there's places in the world where culturally and television wise, they're like 20, 30 years behind the United States.
That's true.
And it's just very strange, because when you come across these people in these countries, you're just amazed when they're looking at television shows that are like from the 60s, and they're like, this is the greatest thing we've ever seen. It's fantastic. And they're watching like shows like shows that our dads remember, and then so I'm thinking one possibility is that these Men in Black are being generated from a place that is way behind the rest of us in terms of what they do and their technology and culture as well.
Well, and of course, here's the same question I just asked you off the air from one of our listeners that says, what do you know about the black-eyed children? Are they Men in Black related?
I don't think they are, but again, I can tell people I have a solution for them. Just like asking for the badge number, making sure you get the badge number. Just don't open the door for any wayward children that appear at your door, because these things are very possibly real, and they are very possibly malevolent. And you don't, and there's that, one of the things about the black-eyed children is that for people who don't know, there's children who appear at people's doors, usually at night, and say that they're in distress, and they look down at their feet as they're talking to the adults. And usually it's adults who are alone. How they know that, I don't know. But usually it's adults that are alone by themselves in the home that particular time. And they'll say, I'm lost. I need my parents. Please let me in. Please let me in. And they won't look up. They'll just keep looking down. And they appear, sometimes they appear in out-of-date clothing. Sometimes, but they appear to be real. And people always say they can feel like a malevolence from these children. And also the children are very monotone. Their voice continues at the same tone without variation like a normal human would. And so that kind of sets them off. And a lot of people do the right thing. They just slam the door shut, lock it, double lock it, and just run away. But there could be others who let them in. There's the ancient thing about out of study of demons and supernatural creatures from ancient times that says that supernatural creatures are not allowed to enter your home unless they can trick you into inviting them in. And that seems to be part of the black-eyed children thing. So, like I said,
yeah, I mean, it's very vampire related. I mean, that's the lore around vampires is that, you have to invite them into your home or they can't come in. And certainly this feels very similar. But yeah, a lot of people that have had encounters, they say that they get this horrible feeling, this gut feeling that's just wrenching, to just close the door, stay away from them, don't let them in. So luckily, from the stories that have come forward, that these people have not let them in. I don't know what would happen if they did, but I'm sure it wouldn't be anything good.
Yeah, and maybe we'll never find out because those who did open the doors, there's a lot of missing people out there.
That's true.
Every year in the United States, there's about 30,000 missing people that never get tied to a body, never are recovered, and we never know what actually happens with them.
And
that amount, my goodness.
That's a huge amount. Now, David Paulides, he's written a number of books about this and the disappearances in our national forests, and there's a big cover-up around this, apparently.
Yes.
And he talks about also stairways that are deep into the woods. We're talking 30 miles into the woods. And you come across this, brand new staircase that goes nowhere.
Oh, man.
And the foresters are told never to go near them and never to touch them. Do you know anything about that?
I wonder what kind of cover story they tell the foresters to keep them away from these staircases. That's because you'd have to tell them something.
I don't know. But they find them in different forests throughout the United States, and they're all different. But it's the only story I heard about somebody who went up the staircase was a man in the Philippines. He was he was somebody who was an official. He was running from a stray dog. He ran up one of these staircases and the dog disappeared. He ran back down and went back to headquarters, and he had lost his job. And he had lost his job because he'd been gone for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. I remember reading that.
Yeah, so these are really amazing stories, but it sounds like not just in our national forests with the staircases, but in other places, there are portals where.
Now, I need to find that story. How do I? Now, that story that you just said, how does a person find that story?
I found it on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It was reported there, and that may be I don't know if David has written about it too, but it's these staircase stories are very, very spooky. And again, it sounds to me like these are portals and that are used by other entities that you talk about. The Extradimensionals may be using portals like this. We just don't know what they are. We think it's a normal staircase, or they're not normal staircases. And there have been people that have taken hunters that have seen strange physical aberrations just in the air. I just heard about one that took a picture of it, of a woman who was a hunter, and her husband was some type of scientist who dealt with opticals. And she produced this photograph that they didn't know what it was. But it sounds like it's what you're talking about, with how these entities get from one place to another.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of Paulides material. His excellent material about the missing. Well, mostly it's children that really are the most amazing cases. These poor kids that just disappear from the national parks when they're with their families and they're being watched very closely, and yet they go around. You'll have a 5-year-old child go around a tree for a moment, out of sight of parents who are just a few feet away, and then there's no more noise, no more sound from the child, and the parents eventually they go check, and there's nothing there, it's gone. And I would say that interdimensional is the same as extradimensional. It's probably one of the strongest possibilities as to how these children and even adults are just disappearing in the middle of a national park just from being out of sight for a second, for just a few seconds, and without a trace. No fingerprints, no footprints, no markings anywewhere to show.
And the dogs that they bring out lose the scent. I mean, they just, they'll just come to a stop.
Which is not possible, not physically. It's not physically possible for a dog to lose the scent of someone unless somebody dematerialized. I mean, it's just not physically. It's just not possible.
Exactly. So do you think these portals are throughout the world and they can be, I guess, associated with any place in time?
I'm starting to think that is true. The more I read books from other brilliant authors as well, like David Paulides and others, it's just the extra-dimensional hypothesis just seems to be the only. And when I read things about Bigfoot and how physical Bigfoot is for the people who witness them, but then when they try to pursue these Bigfoot creatures, there's nothing. There's no hair samples, nothing. And, extra-dimensional hypothesis would just answer so many things as far as why things don't leave physical traces. And there's no physical trail on so many of these phenomena.
I agree. I think that the fact that it can move through portals in the blink of an eye and they're gone. Right. And so a huge creature that stands 8 feet tall all of a sudden can just walk through the portal and they're gone. And you're wondering if you just had an hallucination or you had a real experience.
Exactly. And, there's a chance when they go through these portals, they may be taking someone else with them as well. Because sometimes we have these disappearance cases where little kids disappear and sometimes their kids can't even talk yet in these national forests. And then they can reappear 3 days later in the same spot that had been searched several times, half a dozen times by professional searchers. And sometimes the kids, unfortunately, they're deceased with no traces of abuse, no traces of sexual abuse, but they're dead from exposure. And their bodies are naked. And sometimes they've been returned actually alive, and they have no memory of what happened to them during those days that they were missing. So that's
incredible. Yeah, and it's spooky. And again, there's this incredible cover-up going on where the foresters apparently are being told not to talk about it. It's amazing that David's work, he was able to get his hands on so many cases. But this is a big, massive cover-up. They said they weren't even allowed to say how many people had gone missing in these forests. Why is that? Why are they covering this up, John?
Well, in my book, The Extradimensionals, I talk a lot about NASA and even the National Parks Forest Service and other agencies that are in charge of keeping knowledge away from us and keeping information away from us. And one of the things I go into is the carpet stain monitor theory, which is that these agencies, these bureaus, these national offices, these national organizations, they are engaged in cover-ups constantly. But it's not because they have inside information of what's going on. Very often it's because, well, always it's because they're being told what to do and they're following orders. And so that's what they're doing. I don't really think the National Forest Service or NASA, and if anybody wants to see what I'm talking about, just Google NASA cuts the live feed. Just Google that and see how many videos. You got dozens of videos of anytime a satellite picks up a unknown UFO, and I go over this in my book. There's so many instances of a unknown UFO showing up on a satellite feed, and NASA just cuts the feed. That's because that's what they've been ordered to do.
Those stinkers.
Yeah. And if you go on, and if you go on YouTube,
those feeds.
you can find a dozen of those. If you just go on, and how can they?
We're going to have you come back on the show because, believe it or not, this has gone in a flash and we're out of time tonight. But wow. Oh my God, we're just so enjoyed having you here with us. So please promise to come back because you've got so many stories to share.
Absolutely.
Definitely he does.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Patricia, PK, thank you so much. It's
wonderful.
been great.
Very, very interesting, John. Very interesting.
Yes. And again, the name of John's books is Investigators. It's his earlier book and his new book, The Extradimensionals. And both of them were very excellent reads. You will find amazing stories, things you've never heard before, and a totally different take from John. And again, thank you so much, John. And everybody, we'll be back next week. We're getting rid of karma with crystals, and we can't wait to talk to you about that. Until then, we'll see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.